Baltimore's excited to turn the page, and I think it's going to be a fun and exciting game. And the NFL got it right for this one. This is what I wanted all along, and I'm glad they actually pulled the trigger on it.
What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Happy Wednesday. I'm Hayley Lewis, and this is Chiefs News Daily. We got a great interview headed your way. The Chiefs are off today from the media. They'll be, of course, back on the field, hearing from them from the post-game on Thursday night. But as we lead into the game, we're talking with Kevin Oestreicher. He is a reporter in Baltimore for LockedOn Ravens. He also writes for the Ravens Wire. You don't want to miss this. He gives us the inside to how Baltimore is feeling heading into this one. Kevin, appreciate you being on. We were talking about it before we started the recording. This week is madness. You know, it's not only madness because of the AFC Championship, revenge tour, all that stuff going into this. This is the team that kept Baltimore out of the Super Bowl, but it really is just the madness of week one, right? The NFL's starting. It's quite the season opener, and there's a lot riding on this one. How are things in Baltimore for you guys leading up to Thursday?
Yeah, I think just a bunch of energy in general. Obviously, there is the heartbreak here in Baltimore, what happened in the AFC Championship game, and just how that all went down.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a new season. I mean, you can't look back at 2023 and say, okay, well, if the Ravens beat the Chiefs, they get their revenge. That's the big word that's been used, is that revenge game, like you talked about. But you heard Lamar Jackson on Sunday, Roquan Smith, others as well say, look, it's a new season and you got to move forward. And the Chiefs right now are standing in the Ravens' way of having a good start, much like the Ravens are standing in the Chiefs' way this season of having a good start. So kind of wipe the slate clean, try to put it all behind you. And there's going to be a lot of that energy with the banner and with all the celebrations happening at Arrowhead. But for Baltimore, after how last season ended, they knew that they had a good shot to win the Super Bowl, but they just couldn't get it done when it mattered. Now for this regular season opener, Baltimore's just trying to get off on the right foot. They entered the season healthy. That's a big point for them after how many injuries they've dealt with over the past 4 or 5 seasons. So energy is good in Baltimore. Definitely some nervous energy, but more so excitement than anything else.
What do you think was the missing piece last season? And going into this season, have they found the missing piece to get past a team like the Chiefs?
I think they had all the pieces last year. I think the issue was just their game plan.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty shocking, and I'm sure even to people outside of Baltimore, kind of how they approached that game, where the reason they got to where they were last season was they ran the ball so effectively.
Yeah.
And they had their pass game complement that really well. Then you go into that game and to come out of it with 6 running back carries. That's not what they did to get there. And that was what lost them. And I think they kind of played into the Chiefs' hands. I think Steve Spagnuolo did a phenomenal job of kind of baiting the Ravens into doing what he wanted and not what they wanted. And also the fact that game was looking very early. Like it was going to be this 35-32 shootout, a 7-0, 7-7, 14-7 very quickly. And the Ravens might have panicked a little bit. So this season, I think it's just staying true to what they had, but they don't have those pieces because again, every season's a new year and the Ravens lost a lot. They lost guys like Patrick Queen, Geno Stone, 60% of their starting offensive line, and they replaced those players with youth. And I think that most of that will pay off. A lot of guys are ready for those increased roles, but it's unrealistic to say that I think 100% of those guys are going to be up to the level they need them to. So in my opinion, Baltimore's in a good position. And I think that last season was just so weird because Kansas City in the regular season, that was a pretty subpar regular season. I know you know that from
you're not shocking anyone here.
From an offensive perspective, it was kind of a flip where, okay, the defense is what's doing it here. But then when the playoffs started, it doesn't matter in the regular season. All it takes is to be the best team in the playoffs, and that's what Kansas City was. So the mood here in Baltimore is, look, the regular season is important for establishing trends and getting guys on the same page, gaining momentum, but we know that the Ravens are a good regular season team. They've proven that over the course of their franchise history. So for this season, just being able to get into those habits so that when you do get into those big moments, you don't kind of fold like what the Ravens did last year to get past a team like Kansas City, who was obviously the team to beat. There's no question.
We talked with defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo, who you mentioned his game plan. Every time we talk to him, he talks about Lamar Jackson very, in my opinion, differently than a lot of other quarterbacks. He understands and respects his game, but yet Lamar has continued to be the quarterback who everyone says is so talented, even a lot of people surpassing or saying that he surpasses Mahomes' game. But yet there's an element about that never gets him past the postseason or all the way to the, to the big stage. Doesn't finish the postseason is a better way to say it. Does Baltimore feel the same way about him? Is there, and I don't want to say choke, but I mean, those are the words being passed around. What is it about Jackson that hasn't been able to fully get him to the Super Bowl stage?
Yeah, I think part of it is just his own performance. I'm not going to sit here and say that Lamar Jackson deserves no blame. He deserves plenty of it. And I think that it all does fall on the quarterback. The quarterback's the most important position. And when you talk about blame, we hear it all the time with, I know in that Super Bowl that Kansas City lost to Tampa, the whole story was how poor the offensive line was. But Mahomes still got some blame for that, even though I don't think that is warranted because his offensive line couldn't block. The next year, Kansas City brought in a whole new line, and that worked out for him in a good way. But for Lamar, some of it's been his decision-making. Some of it's been, the increased pressure, just getting used to those lights. This was his first AFC Championship game. And look, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, all those guys, they've been there. They've done that. That was, it was smooth sailing for them. They're like, all right, this is just another game. Let's go. That game was the biggest game in Lamar Jackson's career, was the biggest home game in Baltimore Ravens history. And there was a lot there. And so Lamar Jackson, he can handle pressure, but some guys, it just takes a little time. I also think for him, just being able to stay within game flow, and that's not even just the all Lamar thing, that is also on the coaches, because we have seen, even if you want to go back to that 2019 season where they went 14-2 and, they were all these Super Bowl favorites and whatnot. And kind of the same thing happened, like what we saw against Kansas City last year, where the Ravens abandoned their run game. Lamar had 500 total yards in that game, and he still gets blamed for that, but he had plenty of receiver drops. So it's an all-around effort. But Lamar Jackson, there is this mood of like, okay, well, he hasn't been able to get the job done, but he has had good playoff games. That Texans game prior, he was incredible. He was able to get the job done there. But in my opinion, Lamar deserves blame for it, but not all the blame. And I think that's kind of where, you start to leak into the national media stuff. And it's like, oh, okay, well, Lamar this, Lamar that. Yes, we can put the blame on him, but I also think it can be distributed elsewhere.
It's going to be an interesting season, that's for sure, because as we always go into it, we have all these headlines, all these, happy storylines going into it. And then, it never happens according to plan. I'll leave you with this one. How important is this game? I mean, it's week one. I don't want to say, and I'm never going to say it doesn't matter, but it's week one. And it is an AFC game. It's two contenders. It does set the tone. The Chiefs had the Bengals right after it, which sucks. But in your opinion, how much should people play into this game mattering?
I think it does matter. And I'm always a big, when I talk on my shows and have conversations, I always say that, look, we don't really talk about September games as much because they're in September. When we do talk about September games, in December, when teams are fighting for playoff spots and when teams have that, whether it's conference record, division record, or just general record, this AFC is so loaded. I'm not going to sit here and say, okay, the season for both these teams lives and dies off of week one. I think that would be a little bit of an overreaction. But I do think when you start talking about, look, these two teams are division favorites, at least in my book. I mean, I'd be pretty shocked if Kansas City didn't win their division. And for Baltimore, I have them over the other teams in the North. If we're talking about two teams that are fighting for maybe like seeding, the number one seed, that playoff bye, and whichever team loses that game has the clear disadvantage there, that's big. But I do think from a tone-setting perspective, it is huge. Now, obviously not the biggest. We know Kansas City lost last year to Detroit and still went on to win the Super Bowl. But I think for Baltimore's perspective and Kansas City's perspective, this is a good opportunity to show, hey, like, we're here again and we're ready. Not that both these teams won't be competitive and competitors this year, but I try to, again, downplay the regular season in terms of, like, again, the playoffs are what matters, but I don't want to just completely dismiss it because you have to have a good regular season in order to get to where you want to go and build those habits. And for Baltimore, I know if they lose the game, it'll probably be chaos, as I'm pretty sure everybody assumes. If they win the game, obviously it's a good feeling. But I know that there are probably going to be some underlying ones for a lot of people of, man, what if they could just do it last year? And obviously Kansas City got the better of them. But again, Baltimore's excited to turn the page, and I think it's going to be a fun and exciting game. And the NFL got it right for this one. This is what I wanted all along, and I'm glad they actually pulled the trigger.
Again, make sure you check out Kevin Oestreicher. He is Locked On Ravens, also writing for the Ravens Wire. And make sure you give us a like and subscribe right here on the KCSN YouTube channel. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. The game is almost here. T-minus 24 hours. We'll see you on the post-game show after Thursday night.